Iowa State is not a program, and like most Big 12 programs, they are not set up to be a team that is just continuously making Big 12 title games. We got to talk about week 0. As much as I want to talk about the SEC the whole time, week 0 is getting closer than you may realize. About 2 weeks. That special Saturday is going to be back. Last year, we had Georgia Tech face against Florida State, and which is a very interesting matchup to look back on, knowing that Florida State would lose one of 10 losses starting in Dublin, Ireland, and Georgia Tech would be a team that pushes Georgia, the SEC champion, to the brink. I mean, what was it? 7, 8, 9, 10 overtimes. And now we come back to Dublin 365 days later, Kansas State versus Iowa State. This is probably the best Dublin, Ireland matchup that we've had up to this point, just in terms of quality of teams. And when evaluating early season matchups, a simple way of looking at it is, who do I have at the coach and who do I have at the quarterback? And then the conversation really starts, because you can start diving into the niche offensive line dynamics, the defensive line. I need to know who is leading the team and how much continuity do I have? Well, unlucky for me, this matchup has continuity on both sides, Chris Kleiman and Avery Johnson. And then you have Rocco Beck. I'm blanking on Iowa State's head coach right now because he's one of my favorites, so I apologize. But you have continuity on both of these teams. But where you don't have continuity, and I think is a huge concern for me, is Iowa State's receiver room, losing 2 NFL wide receivers who were incredibly effective with their senior quarterback in Rocco Becht. And I loved Iowa State last year because they had so much coming back for another round of Iowa State football. You had so much to definitively know your identity going into the next season. Iowa State is not a program, and like most Big 12 programs, they are not set up to be a team that is just continuously making Big 12 title games. They're not pulling in the roster like that. It's never going to be like that for Iowa State. It's going to be about taking in guys and developing them and building up to these years. And last year, I cashed in all my chips. I had Iowa State going to the Big 12 title game. I had Iowa State being one of the best teams in that conference because of those reasons, because they had really talented players who had been with that program for extended amounts of time and had developed for this opportunity, and they had an incredible year. I don't have that right now with them. They are churning out a lot and having to put in a lot of fresh faces, a lot of transfers. You have the quarterback, you have a good head coach, but you're now facing a version of you in the Kansas State Wildcats. Avery Johnson in year 2, Chris Kleiman, a very good head coach, Dylan Edwards, a dynamic running back. If you remember, if you watched any Colorado football, he was a transfer. He actually transferred last year. He's going to be in year 2. That alone and that dynamic is really intriguing because I always will have faith that Kansas State is going to produce a very dynamic rushing attack, a very effective rushing attack, no matter who the offense coordinator is, because that's just that's their brand. You know Kansas State by that factor. Their defense, I think, should take a step forward. They had a problem in the secondary. So if Iowa State clicks with their transfer wide receivers and Rocco Becht, the game is over. But you know what doesn't travel that well in college football? Passing attacks. You know what does travel really well? Rushing attacks. You know who can run the ball better? It's going to be Kansas State. I think Kansas State, this is going to be a low-scoring game. If I were to predict, and I've done a complete breakdown on this matchup, I fully expect that Avery Johnson's play is going to take a step forward to match Rocco Becht. And the play style that he's going to run is going to be a lot more effective early into the season with a lot more veteran leadership in this defensive room that's wanting to take a step forward, especially in their biggest weakness. They knew going into this season, we have to be better in the secondary. And Rocco Becht in this defense with Iowa State, they also knew they have to be better against the run. Because I was there live when Cam Scatterbo did what he did against Iowa State in that Big 12 title game. And to be fair, Cam Scatterbo did that against everybody, but still it was a weakness. So now you're kind of combating, two teams that are wanting to get better in their biggest weakness going against a team that's very strong in that. I have more faith that Kansas State pushes that a little bit more and is more effective against that because of the roster that they have and the continuity. So with that in mind, I think this is going to be low scoring. This Dublin game is really weird, and it's honestly a really good matchup between two very even teams. I'm surprised that the point spread is above 3. I think this should be around 2, 1.5. I do think Kansas State is correctly favored in this game. I would not be surprised if it becomes something that if Iowa State stalls out the first couple drives, that Kansas State's able to really control the game from the get-go. And they may not blow them out because I don't think their offense is going to be able to produce that much that quickly. But this could definitely be something where we're leaving halftime and it's 21-10. And it really feels like Kansas State is just kind of controlling the front seven. I like their offensive line. I like some of the pieces that they've added. I'm going to say Kansas State wins this game in Dublin, Ireland to kick off their year. And I still think Iowa State's going to be pretty good for the rest of the season. This does not deter what their season will be defined as. I still think Iowa State's going to be a problem for most Big 12 teams, and same can be said for Kansas State. If the results are inverse, they're going to be fine. It is funny to have a week 0 matchup be a conference matchup, but I still think we're definitely going to be looking at these teams in a positive light, unlike we did with Florida State and I'm blanking, Georgia Tech. Ooh. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, let's talk about some coaches that are under the most pressure in the vacuum of just 2025. Because I could talk about coaches that, like, if they do not play well this year, they're going to be on the hot seat for 2026. I think Brian Kelly is probably in that. Although I talked about how Brian Kelly is under a lot of pressure this year, he's going to get most likely one more year. Mike Elko being another one. I think if Matt Rule disappoints this upcoming year, he may get one more year unless like a guy like Dylan Raiola goes into the transfer portal. I'm talking about like true pressure cooker situations. Billy Napier is the easy one. And he's been in this pressure cooker for about 2 seasons now. And I understand a lot of people have the faith that it's just going to work out, me included. If it doesn't, though, because as unfortunate as it is with a guy like DJ Lagway, who has dealt with a lot of injuries, it could be a situation where it's just unfortunate that the process just didn't work out in his favor. It's unfortunate that the schedule is as brutal as it is. Maybe DJ Lagway takes a step forward, but it's just not enough because their ceiling goes as high as his ceiling, and his ceiling's unlimited. But if they end up 6-6, like how many times can you keep, spinning the wheel with the talent that's on this roster that should win some games? And you got a taste of it last year. It's not like it didn't happen last year. Administration has seen it. Even with some of the difficult games that they did play with a lesser roster, now you have a roster that should be set for it, and you pull off like a 6-6, 5-7, 7-5, which isn't out of the realm of possibility with a roster like this. He is under immense pressure because I don't think he's going to just get another year. James Franklin, he is not someone that is going to be under pressure to be fired. He is in a different type of pressure. He is now, I would probably highlight as the new Ryan Day in a sense of you have been in this space. You are a shark circling the national title, but you haven't been able to get the job done. The way that we talked about a guy like Ryan Day, who was just continuously having his roster and his program in the vicinity of a national title, James Franklin has now taken that spot in my eyes. A guy that you have to get the job done, and it might have to be this year because everyone will say, the defense is going to be good. Drew Aller's going to be good. You have 2 NFL level running backs. Kretschman Allen more than likely starts at 90% of college football teams. Same could be said for Nicholas Singleton. But then you circle the wide receiver room. You lose a guy like Tyler Warren, probably one of the best college football players I've ever seen. But you invested into it, which was not something they were doing before. They brought in a lot of talent into that wide receiver room. You have continuity with the OC. You have a new DC that just won a national title. At what point is it going to click? Because Penn State, to me, is not a team that is always going to be in the hunt to actually win the national title. They've always been a team that is going to potentially either make it or be very close. Even if they beat Notre Dame last year, they were not going to beat Ohio State. They were not a team that you could feel confident was going to win it. This is different this year. I think they have the ceiling and capability to win a national title. And you know what that brings is pressure. Pressure to a coach who has not been able to get the job done. Because the job for Penn State is to get back to the mountaintop. And he's done everything he can to get this program, and he deserves immense amount of credit that people really do not give him in where Penn State was and what James Franklin was able to do. And so he can have that credit, but he can also have some expectations because that's what this roster is going to provide. And the last coach we'll talk about is Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley has so much pressure on him this year for reasons that aren't directly with the football field. It's the fact that they have a top 2 class for the upcoming high school rankings. A top 2 class that USC, who poached the general manager from Notre Dame, has done a fantastic job on the recruiting trail. An immaculate job. It's not just the names and the stars that they were able to bring in. It's the guys that they have been able to bring in. I dive into, high school recruiting extensively to understand, is it really the star value or is it the player? And USC's got some guys coming in if they were to stay. Because I don't think they're staying if it's 6-6, 7-5. I don't think they're staying if they don't see progression in USC getting better. USC, I can't remember the statistic off my head, had so many one-score losses last year. Something very similar to what we were doing with, Nebraska and Scott Frost. They had all these one-score losses, and we thought they could bounce back, and they never did. We're kind of in the same boat with USC. They went from the hundreds in defensive metrics 2 years ago. Last year, they were in the 50s. Can you take that step forward? The biggest question right now in my eyes is the quarterback. With a Lincoln Riley-led team, I like Jaden Maiava. I think he's a solid quarterback. But what does he need to be for this team to be a Big Ten championship contender? Because Jacoby Lane and Malachi Lemon are incredibly dynamic. The wide receivers are some of the best. I think even post Jordan Addison, this is the best wide receiver room. I like the running backs. There's things to like. But Lincoln Riley, what is going to be enough to keep that class? Because that class is his golden ticket. That class adds pressure. Because if he loses that talent acquisition card that really has not been there consistently with USC really becomes a concern for long-term ramifications of what we look back at as the Lincoln Riley era for USC.